Yeah, I think that's good. Yeah, recording.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, welcome everyone to my philosophy and design talk. I'm Karina Quinn, and I run the second year, as I said before at the beginning of the meeting. So I'm really looking forward to meeting you all next year. Let me see if I can go ahead and share my screen. Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. Right. So, knock at the door. All right. So you probably had a whole load of lectures around design and philosophy this week, and to end the week, I wanted to bring out a whole load of objects to do a bit of a show and tell. So that could be quite fun, I think. I wanted to think about how philosophy can be embodied through design. Like the culture you can create in a place, the place that you work. So for this essay, you're imagining yourselves in these studios, which you're going to name, and you're going to think about how you work together and how you talk about how you would work together, perhaps. So I was thinking about the culture that you create in a place you work and how that culture can permeate your environment and your life in various ways, and ultimately feed back into your work. So everything you do is embodied in your work, and your work is making you embody the things you're thinking in your work. So I decided to think about the lunches that I'd had at work whilst working for different designers over my career. It's maybe over about 15 years of working in the UK design industry, mainly in London, and how different the lunches were in the different studios. And I've worked for lots of different studios. Lunch or food is a moment where everyone gets together and talks about projects, about life, about things they're interested in, about shared ideas. And you can find out a lot about a person over lunch, their politics, their relationships, and a lot of the time their philosophy on things and design particularly. So in this presentation, I wanted to expand on the part of your brief that's about you working together as a studio and how research and practice come together or can be embodied in your work. I want to do this by remembering the designers I've worked for and with, and the ways their philosophy or design thinking merged into their lives. So to try and give you a bit of an industry perspective and take it out of the university context. I thought about calling this talk What I Ate at Work. So a bit less philosophical than the expression of design philosophy through lunch, because it's literally about like, what did I eat at work working for these different people? So the first person I worked for when I graduated was a designer called Tord Bontje, and he's a Dutch designer. He was actually based in Peckham at the time, so it was really round the corner from Goldsmiths. The studio that he worked in was like behind this chicken shop. It was very informal. The whole place smelled like chicken the whole time, which was quite a sort of strong memory, I think. We were all sort of huddled in this tiny first floor flat of a tiny studio down an alleyway, and it was filled with these paper cutting flowers, which was the sort of stuff he did was thinking about like decoration through industrial forms of manufacture. So these were sort of die cut paper lamps made of Tyvek. But he did lots of sort of metal punched patterned tables and what do you call it? Photo etched aluminium, windy lights and things, and laser cut silk and things like this. So it was really interesting the processes he was using to create things that were seemingly kind of frivolous or decorative, industrial with the decorative, which was super interesting. And yeah, we'd spend the whole time making these cut flowers. I think I've got some of them here. This is the light that I worked on the prototype for. I don't know whether you can see this, but it's just been in a plastic bag. So this actually hangs over the top of this and it creates this type of thing. Oh. So for lunch, we would eat lunch like a family. We'd all gather around in his partner's studio. She was a glass artist. Sit downstairs and we'd go and get lunch from Lidl, which was the shop around the corner in Peckham, maybe you know it. And we'd have these open sandwiches with lots of cheese and ham. It was very, very Dutch. Let's see if you can see this. I need to plug in. And as the junior designer, I would go to Lidl every day to buy the stuff. And all this stuff, this cheese and ham and this lovely stuff was probably actually from Holland because it was coming from Lidl. And this was around 2003. And it was my first sort of experience of what was it like to work in a design studio. And I probably learned the most out of actually chatting with everyone over lunch. This guy was nominated for the Designer of the Year at that time for the Design Museum, and all the connections, all the kind of gossip around what's going on in industry or how do you get stuff done or who's collaborating with who, that all came out at lunchtime around these open sandwiches that we all shared together. So 10 years later, in 2013, I worked for Matthew Barney, who's an artist in New York. He's a filmmaker, artist, maybe more famously known as a former partner of Bjork. And he makes these quite incredible and surreal art films, which you should really check out if you don't know them. Probably some of the most famous ones are Cremaster Cycle, which had lots of different editions. And he would make all these strange characters and props, including making himself into a character for these films. And there were all these strange, elaborate sets. His studio was a huge warehouse in Long Island City, just over the river from Manhattan and opposite the UN building. So it was a pretty amazing, but quite sort of understated sort of place. You wouldn't really think it was remarkable from the outside because it was just this big warehouse. And they spent a lot of time making props for the film, which they were working at the time, called River of Fundament. And most of his employees and collaborators were actually friends from art college. And they were big into skating and death metal. And they were super sweet, lovely people. And there was a skate ramp for them to just hang out at lunchtime or at break times. Within this huge warehouse, there was this classic yellow taxi that was sprayed matte black, which was a prop for one of the films. And there was an actual sort of real size upside down house within this warehouse too. And it was quite an amazing place. And kind of interesting for me to be working on. I was working on archiving his drawings for an exhibition at the Morgan Library, which was a private sort of gallery library in New York. So what did we eat there? Well, every day we would order a takeaway. They had this big lever arch folder of all the menus for the local takeaways, and we just kind of flip through and say, oh, what are we having today? Who wants what? And we just get takeout lunch for the whole studio every day. Maybe this is a New York thing, I don't know, but I was just really enjoying that. We'd usually have sort of bento boxes and sit together on this office mezzanine overlooking the warehouse the whole warehouse with all the props and the big taxi and all these different things. And there was this picnic bench for a table, huddled up around a heater because this place was so cold. And lunch would be delivered in a brown bag every day by a different delivery person. And it was a kind of a meeting of different types of minds. I think, you know, the sorts of people that work for artists are really varied and they have lots of different skills. So I got to meet people who'd been graphic designers. I got to meet one of the girls that was working there was a student from NYU in drama. And there were just loads of different types of skills and personalities there, all collaborating on the same common thing and all sitting around eating the same thing. So that was super interesting to me. And okay, you're probably thinking, oh, why is this important? What is this to do with philosophy? And well, I guess it's funny how you remember the places or remember places at all based on the experience you had there. And food is one of those immediate things, I think, that brings you back to a memory or a moment in time. And what I remember of this experience was that generosity of buying this takeout lunch every day for the whole studio, and this weirdness of being in a huge space next to a beautiful New York skyline, but never really ever seeing that skyline because we were in, you know, in this insular warehouse, looking inwards towards these strange fictions in the making. And it was like a world within a world, and we're eating our sort of takeout food together every day. That's my main memory of that experience. So one person who really, really loved food that I worked for and cooking was Martino Gamper, who I worked for in around 2005, 2006, and helped set up his studio, and I worked with him on quite a few projects and prototypes for things he was working on at the time. He's a designer. I would say he's a designer, but some people call him an artist or a sculptor. Maybe he's all of those things. And he's got a really lovely approach. You probably know him from his 100 Chairs project. It's called 100 Chairs in 100 Days. And I guess it was a challenge he'd set himself to make 100 chairs in 100 days. Not consecutive days, by the way, but a chair a day for over 100 days. I worked on this project and made this one in the corner. I don't know whether you can see it. Bottom right-hand corner, it's a beanbag chair thingy. So I worked on that, but I worked on a lot of the other ones too. And he's often referred with this project, he's referred to this method of putting these chairs together as 3D sketching, making, repairing and remaking in a live, improvised way. And this process was sort of his philosophy. On the one level, it was about collecting broken, unwanted things, unwanted chairs. In this case, the chairs he'd found on the street. He had a lot of friends who'd given him chairs they didn't want or chairs that were broken. And it was about randomness, this being responsive and embracing the imperfect. It was about fixing and repair. It created these anthropomorphic, odd objects, which were really strange and quite funny and quite like him in his sort of randomness and his energy. I mean, I look at these chairs and I think, you know, only Martino could have done these because they're very funny and they're unexpected, and that's sort of who he is in a way. And it was really interesting to see how this philosophy or this approach was really embodied in everything he did. So I helped him set up his studio, as I said, I was sort of like his first assistant or employee, or mainly assistant really. And we worked from this warehouse he'd rented above a printer's in Hackney, and he was living there and working there. And there was also a little workshop, and he had this grumpy flatmate called Lars, and everything was sort of very improvised. And of course he had a kitchen there, and we ate a lot of pasta. But the nice thing was that he cooked it, and cooked a different kind of pasta every day, every time. And it was a bit experimental. So sometimes he had this really lovely recipe called ginger pasta, and he's Italian. So, but he's from the north, like he's from the Dolomites. So it's sort of like Italian, sort of German, sort of Austrian kind of thing, not like a Southern Italian. And I don't know where the ginger came from, but he loved this piece of ginger. He loved ginger so much. And lots of the stuff he would cook would have ginger in it. And you wouldn't really think of putting ginger with pasta, but he would do this amazing kind of tomato sauce, and he'd grate like a whole hand of ginger into this sauce, like fry that up. And that would be the ginger pasta with like Parmesan on the top. And it just tastes so good, like ginger and tomato with pasta with the cheese on top. And I never would have put that combination together. But that was sort of his signature dish in a way. And I don't know, it's really good. You should try it, actually. Ginger pasta. It was like a classic kind of Martino combination. Like, okay, I'm going to put ginger and tomatoes and the pasta, and it shouldn't work, but it totally works. But then there was this one day where he cooked me like a cinnamon tomato pasta. It wasn't very good. It was like just a bit weird. So there was this kind of sliding scale of like things that worked and things that were a bit too experimental. It didn't quite sort of land, but I ate it anyway, like a good employee. And sometimes we would have watermelon too afterwards. And as the studio grew, it became more of a family, and there would be more of a kind of lunchtime vibe. Journalists would come over, or curators, or other designers and collaborators, and we'd all sit around the table together. This is the ginger pasta being prepared. It's become a thing now, I think. So this is the studio. And what was really nice was the eating felt so natural with his practice of making. You can see some of the chairs up on the wall there. It was the whole atmosphere. His way of working, thinking and making came together, and people came together too. The cooking, just to give you a bit of a backstory on that, the cooking all started as a side gig in the early 2000s. So it was a pop-up restaurant before pop-up restaurants existed, I guess, and it was called Trattoria al Cappello. And he ran it in a bar in Hatton Garden intermittently, like every month. And what was really lovely was that all the kitchen equipment fitted in the boot of his car. So this is kind of big old Volvo. He had the kitchen, he literally even had the kitchen sink there in the car, and it would be wheeled out and set up around in the kitchen. Oh no, it wasn't in the kitchen, it was in the bar. And sometimes I'd be helping him cook. So I'm his assistant, and I'd be the assistant at the dinners as well, being like a sous chef. And I'd be assisting him pretty much the same way, but instead of like wood or plastic or card, it would be like ginger and more ginger and some olive oil. I'd be delicately slicing the peel off an orange and slicing it and layering it with onion. Here's a bit of show and tell. Orange and onion salad, all layered up with olive oil and pepper and salt and more olive oil and some olives on the top. Super nice. And the process would be the same random combinations and juxtapositions and just the materials were different. Just the food was the material. And with these food events come more things to design. So you start thinking about all the objects you need to make around the idea of food, these gatherings, friends, out of necessity or just for fun. So the event is the excuse or the chance to make. And at this point, I think this is where you start to create a culture that involves people and things and atmosphere that feels unique to the thing you're putting on. And the more you do it, the more people know this culture and experience this atmosphere, and the more ambitious you get each time. And that's certainly true with him, because he'd be designing these little coasters that you see at the bottom right for the trattoria, and they became a product. There's kind of like die cut out of leather, or these massive washers. Are they nuts or bolts or candle holder nuts, basically, that would all form together in a little family. And working together, you become part of that culture. You become wrapped into it. So all of these objects, including the spoons on this lovely big holder with holes drilled in them, or this glass, looks like a plastic water bottle but is actually blown glass. Like, all of these things were part of our world. And then you can make books, and he made these lovely books to capture that culture and grow it and spread it beyond yourself. So making a book, maybe like doing a piece of writing like you were about to do as a group, gives you a chance to archive what you do, to write about it and to distribute it and to tell other people about that culture too. And this is certainly what these lovely little, very informal, very raggedy paper, almost like a zine, books are about. This is a nice quote from Martino that seems to resonate with today. And he says, "This is part of my life, not just a design project, but a gathering of my friends. It's not about dividing your life and your practice." It's where they cross over. So, is philosophy where life and practice come together? How do we take what we believe or what we are interested in, explore and build on it in real life? This is an idea that we're working on with second year, how to develop a studio culture and how to do that when we're so isolated and not connected. How can we do that in other ways? It's not just who you work with, but what you do together, or what you can do together as a collective. And I'm really interested in how studio culture can develop approaches to design, values, how we can inspire each other through creating a place that is unique to the people that inhabit it. So over the years, Trattoria continues and got bigger and bigger. This is a dinner at a town in Italy, and we did dinners at galleries and design menus and things like this. And here's Martino joining up a little bit about design and his philosophy. He's talking about cooking and design being very similar. Similarly, with food and design, you have to have a lot of produce and you try to create something out of that produce. It's about responding to what you find, what's out there. In terms of technique, there are only about 6 or 7 ways of cooking things: steaming, frying, roasting, boiling, and so on. That's very similar to design. You only have a few basic production techniques you can combine. Then you try and manipulate things, try to find different ways of mixing them. I also like spontaneity. There's no going back in cooking. In design, you can always go back and fix your mistakes, but not in cooking. So also design spreads beyond the kitchen, and with friends collaborating on events in the community. And here's a project we did with Arnold Circus, which is a place in Shoreditch, and it's like a big bandstand. I worked on prototyping this stool, which was designed really just for the Arnold Circus project. and made it out of cardboard. And now it's a product that sells in lots of shops. Maybe I can show you this. I don't know whether you can see this. This is like the mini version, like a kid's version, but this what you see on screen is the bigger thing. And yeah, this kind of food theme, a family of stools sitting together. And here's a little show that he curated at the Serpentine. I just want to play you a little bit of this video because I think it's nice to hear him talking about his philosophy. I hope you can hear this. Please put it in the chat if you can't.
Can't hear the sound.
You can't? Okay, 1 second. Let me see. Okay.
Oh, it's very faint. I can just about hear it, but it's really faint.
Okay, maybe I'm just going to pull out my... Can you hear this now? Oh, let's go back. Okay. Can you hear this now?
Designer State of Mind is my first exhibition as a curator. I was asked in 2013 by the Serpentine Gallery to curate a show about design. In this new challenge, I wanted to bring together a lot of private collection of people that are friends, colleagues, in some cases people that I wanted to meet, was interested in their work. And I wanted to bring together this collection to show the plurality in a way, the vastness of the design world. Not as a singular take on my particular taste, but as a cross-section of what design has been and what design is and what it can be potentially in the future.
The music really nice.
At the exhibition in Bolzano, I asked also 3 local collectors to contribute with their collections. A mineral collection, mineral rock collection of my former neighbor, Florian Meyer, who has been an amateur rock collector for 60 years. And I wanted to include those minerals because for me they are the starting point of where design started, flintstones and the various. And somehow there's always been inspiration for creative people. Nature has always been an inspiration. Organic materials, rocks, and so on. The second collection is a collection of a local designer called Walter Thaler, who very much collects material samples, and he works a lot in interior projects, and he tries to reinvent materials, he tries to mix materials, and there's somehow a cross-section of his activity in his material library. And the third collection is the collection of an artist, Betty Scoover. She collects time capsules somehow. She stuffs a lot of objects into glasses, leaves them for several years in one place, and then maybe digs them out again and then makes works from it. She gave me a rather large glass, and their object has somehow left our everyday use, discarded, maybe not so functional anymore. But it's still talk about what happens to objects when they somehow start to disintegrate and start to malfunction or have another use, potentially used as a metaphor for something, or they might have a use as a symbol.
I guess the point of that is like so Martino has a big opportunity to exhibit all his work at the Serpentine, and this was a travelling exhibition, so I guess this video is taken in another iteration of that exhibition, which was called Design as a State of Mind. And he takes the opportunity to just show, not only show his work, but show work of friends of his or people he's interested in, or former neighbours. So it's this whole idea of a kind of like a family of like-minded people, and giving the stage also to them, and seeing how all of that is interconnected with an approach to the way he works and the things he creates, but things that are related, and people, sort of championing people who are part of that too, which I thought was really, really philosophical and lovely and brilliant. So I'm thinking about, okay, who are the heroes of the people I've worked with? And certainly working so closely with Martino, I got to know, okay, I don't know whether he would say this, but I would say like Bruno Munari feels very linked to type of work he does. Achille Castiglione, an Italian furniture designer, and Gio Ponti also, and he actually went on to do some work actually cutting up on reimagining Gio Ponti's works and furniture. But it's funny when you work with someone or you work for someone, you kind of really get a sense of who their heroes are, and not explicitly said, but you can guess where their influences are coming from, or the people who they enjoy the work of. So this is my guesses, I guess. Martino. The person I worked for after Martino was a woman called Ilse Crawford. She was an editor of Elle Decoration magazine. She set up Elle Decoration magazine in the UK back in the 80s, and also the Soho House brand after that, and her own design studio. She's really well established in the design world as someone who has a real philosophy on design, and that philosophy is very particular to her. So here she is on the left outside her studio, and on the right is her house, where she did her meetings with clients, and it was below the studio. So she would literally be living underneath the studio, and then sometimes we go down to her apartment to have lunch or to talk or to have meetings. So it's kind of life and work really intertwined again. In terms of food, we ate a lot of what she called girl food, also known as salads, nuts and fruits at meetings. My little show and tell bowl of nuts and fruits, always in a dark ceramic bowl, almonds and the like. Clients would love coming to our studio as everything was so healthy, and it was also so aesthetically pleasing to look at. This beautiful spread on the table, and then getting out materials and plans and all of that. It was like a still life, and it set up this atmosphere of beauty, which was also in the work and the things she was talking about. So this kind of idea of like generosity and the kind of values the studio had were shown through everything that was on the table. And we'd have these big studio lunches once a week in the kitchen together, which was all part of creating the culture of being together and sharing ideas, a kind of family atmosphere as before with different people. So Ilse was really well known as someone with a very clear design philosophy, as I said before. She set up Elle Decoration, a magazine called Bear, which was about well-being in the early 2000s. And this book called Sensual Home, which is about home and the senses and how you can embody that kind of sensory through your house and interiors. She had this idea of modern and emotional design, design as a frame for life. It's something that evolves, it adapts, it changes with you. It's not a style. She would say that buildings don't need to be new, they evolve with this history and with the new occupants and energies that come within them. And I'd say she's someone who wants to create things that are meaningful and that last. What was really interesting is that she took this into her teaching. So she ran for 20 years a studio, they call them studios or departments in Eindhoven, Design Academy in Eindhoven. It was called Man and Wellbeing. So all of this publications and editorial work and interiors work fed into the things that she was teaching her students. And then, yeah, rather than being someone who's a maker like Martina, she's coming from a different place, like one with an editorial eye. It's intellectual, it's about meaning, it's about space, it's about human behavior, and it definitely is very philosophical. And this was really interesting to work with and to learn from. I'm just going to show you this video on, I'm going to have to stop sharing my screen and pull up the video. This is a really nice example of her talking about her design philosophy through a glass. And it's not even a glass that she designed, it's a glass from a Swedish glass artist. And actually this whole series is called On Design from Nowness. It gets I guess famous designers or whatever to talk about their, like, an object that they love, and through talking about this one object you can tell a lot about their own design philosophy, just through how they describe it and just through the things they highlight as important. So I'll see if you can see this and hear this.
It's so fascinating how many of them are badly designed. You know, we put so much attention into big buildings or fancy chairs, but in fact, if you look at that list of the things you touch every day, there's quite a lot of work to be done. Not here, but in the rest of that list. This glass is designed by Inga Gudrammen, Swedish glass and ceramics designer. It was designed in 1961. Its imperfection is a large part of its perfection. It's not quite straight, even though it's a modern shape. It is exactly the right dimensions for what it needs to do in terms of the width of the top and the base. Its tactility in your hand, its weight. The lip is gently rounded so it doesn't cut. You're putting it in your mouth. It's a very intimate act. So all of those things have been considered, and it has a softness, a care, and you know that somebody's really thought about it. You can't reinvent the spoon or the bowl or the glass. I mean, there are certain essential parameters that have evolved over thousands of years, but of course you can always reinterpret those, and so it's finding that balance between the two where it doesn't become sort of funny shapeism, but still feels relevant and fresh. I think this strikes the perfect balance.
Well, that's the glass. So here's the glass, small one. Actually, I had 4 of them given to me by Ilse, but I broke 2. So these are my last 2. All right, I'm going to share my screen again. Yeah. Right, you can see this. Oh, that's the studio where I worked. Ilse's studio and some of my colleagues there. So, yeah, I guess wanted to sort of try and put together the idea of, okay, who's this person, where are they coming from, and how did their philosophy get embodied in not only the environment and the food, but yeah, the actual sort of place where we work. So this is the place that actually looked like a home. And here's our sample library that we used to have, where you can see, yeah, what was the experience there like every day. That was our library and meeting room at the back, and our kitchen. So we'd have lunch all together pretty much every day, which was pretty intense, but nice at the same time, I guess. And I just wanted to show you something. This is a project that I worked on called The Old Bell, which was a coaching inn and a kind of a reimagining of a coaching inn halfway between London and Oxford. Called it was called The Old Bell. 11th century building. It was trying to make a modern coaching inn, and you'll see this kind of little patch of blanket on the right hand side. I had a little story about that because we part of the design was trying to source these blankets or source the types of materials that would come into all the bedrooms, and we found this herringbone blanket, and we of course we were getting like really great trade discounts, so we'd be working together, and I'd be putting together the spec, and we'd say, you know, who wants one of these blankets? We've got 50% off, and everyone would put in their order for the blanket. So we'd be designing the place, but we'd also be like getting some discount goodies on the side off the back of, you know, these big orders. But what I came to realize was that, of course, we were ordering all the same things, and so all our houses ended up looking the same because we were spending so much time together and we were buying the same stuff. We started wearing things that were similar as well, just because we spent so much time together. So I'd go to my colleagues' houses at the weekend for dinner or something, and, you know, we'd see, actually my partner would see the same cushion and the same blanket and the same candle holder. This is like something that also designed, that she made for Georg Jensen, and so we all ordered one of these. We all had the same stuff in our houses, so we were living these kind of strange parallel lives, which he found quite scary, but I don't know, it was just very normal for me. Just going to play you a little video of a place that we designed. See if you can spot me in here. Just one of the things before I start was that one of the lovely things was when we designed a place, we would usually, as a studio, go there before it opened, and we'd spend a few days. And in this case, this was a sort of like an inn or a hotel in Stockholm, and we all piled in for 3 or 4 days for a before it opened, really soft opening, and we stayed there all together. So it was like a family holiday. And work.
It's on a smaller scale than most hotels, and so automatically, of course, it feels rather friendly. But the idea was very much to make a place that amplified, if you like, and enhanced the life you have when you're staying there. When we start a project, we definitely address the place. It's always looking at the particular nature of the place. So for us, it's about how to bring life to a place. That's the fundamental issue that we look at. Sometimes it's about looking into the history. Sometimes it's really just looking at the specifics of where it is right now. I don't believe in this idea of a sort of international miasma. I think the way to appeal is to have a very clear identity and sense of self. So our attitude here has been to make something that is very Swedish, but more about a Swedish perspective on the world. It's an attitude, it's a spirit, a way of looking at the world.
So that is that's the Swedish hotel that we did. And I had this really nice quote from Ilse, which I thought makes sense for today. So the idea of like design values being integral to your food, your workplace, being the starting point you live and breathe from. And I guess for interiors, it's important that as you're creating worlds, you're creating atmospheres, so everything plays a part. So I'll just read this quote. It says, "Design can be a powerful force. I've never understood why interior design is so often so underestimated, misunderstood and trivialized. It's too often dismissed as something superficial without intrinsic value, an add-on. it's a mistake that it's considered a luxury to be applied if there is money left at the end, rather than an integral part of making and shaping new realities from the outset. So this was her sort of, I guess, response to the idea that, yeah, interior design is superficial, but actually the philosophy of her whole approach and the way our studio worked was really about sort of pulling together a whole experience, and down to the teaspoon that's on the table, down to, I guess, the nuts that are in the bowl, right? Like everything is making up part of what the thing is. So you embody, I guess, through every aspect, your belief. And this is her latest book, which she outlines this philosophy, and I worked on the book actually through working there since the early days, where it was only about 3 or 4 of us. I had amassed this big archive of images from the times that we'd come in to the studio all dressed the same, coincidentally, to cite photos and strange, I don't know, studio lunches and things like this. I managed to put together sort of an archive of different moments within the life of the studio, that some of them appear within these books. And those are the things I think that really capture what the philosophy and the spirit of her studio was about. Not necessarily the finished stuff, but the process stuff. And you will have this too within your work at Goldsmiths. You'll have these moments in the studio, hopefully when we get back to the studio, moments within project work, your process, like for the love of films. I've seen some of the process work. Those are moments where like the culture, the energy of the project is being made, and those are the things you'll never forget, the things that shape your experience. So, you know, all of that process stuff and that journey along the way, even if it feels trivial at the time, is something that can be really meaningful and meaningfully shape your experience and your memory of what it is to be a designer here at Goldsmiths right now. Here are just some of the images from the book. There's a whole section on dinners and lunches and design that brings people together around a table. And the way we worked also, like we had clients, and this is a client drawing, actually not a kid's drawing, of how he wanted his bookshelf to look, and this is how we translated it to come to be in his study. And some of these were the process pictures of bits and bobs that we do. So again, you know, how can philosophy be shown in a collection of things? I'm thinking about Martino and his friends with collections of things, or you collecting a load of process images of a project. How can a spirit of the place be a spirit of a place, or a spirit of a studio or a time be described through objects and these kind of random photos? And I think it's important to acknowledge your heroes. So again, here are my guesses at Ilse's heroes. Well, not guesses, like it's kind of quite clear. Well, she's clearly talked about this before. So design philosophy doesn't come from nowhere. You build upon and you are influenced by the people that you admire and who really, their work or their ideas have really changed the way you think. And she was really good at doing this. Ilse was amazing at creating meaning and value through association and crediting her heroes. So acknowledging their heroes. So this idea of the frame for life, it comes through a quote from Bernard Rudowski. He called architecture a vase for life and also a frame for a way of life. So you can see how work can be directly influenced by other philosophers or writers, and you can celebrate that rather than thinking that everything you say has to be original. Acknowledging your heroes can become part of your philosophy, and connect you to some really important movements, I guess. So this is just my sort of like reflection on these experiences. I guess I thought, you know, after however many years of working for other people, you can get swept up in someone else's philosophy. And after nearly 10 years at Ilse's studio, I felt really fully indoctrinated. So I was, you know, in there, I would talk in a particular way, I would use a particular type of language, very specific to this particular studio. And I started to wonder, what did I personally think? You know, what was my philosophy? And I didn't really know anymore because I was so, you know, wrapped up in this way of thinking, and it was enjoyable to be part of that. But places can become cult-like. You can start saying the same things, you start wearing the same things, you start having the same mannerisms, listen to the same music all the time, and eating too many nuts together. So after I worked for her, I took some time to do a master's, which was really good because it gave me the chance to see to think about other theories and concentrate on my own practice or what I was interested in, I guess. But yeah, I wonder, you know, like how much of Goldsmiths or how much of the culture in the BA of Goldsmiths gets you wrapped up in our own little academic bubble, or our own little very specific cult-like approach to things. How much do you get influenced by seeing other people's work, and that sort of feeds in to a loop where we're all influencing each other? And how does that relate to the real world? I don't know, it's a question we continue to ask ourselves. But coming back to design philosophy, perhaps I'll leave you with a few questions. I think it's interesting to think about the design values you're describing and creating as a collective for this essay. How are your beliefs in this manifest not just in writing, but through drawing, through process, in coming together in an approach to project? What are the various ways that you can manifest your beliefs? Through materials, through speed, through conversation? How else is it manifesting in things that are not part of projects, project related? Perhaps you can consider what is the boundary or blur between life and work for you and your studio? Like, what is that comfortable? Where is it that it becomes uncomfortable or too involved? What is the right balance for you between work and life? If we're designers and design is a state of mind, as Martino said, then how do you live your life by your interests or values? What are your principles? And finally, what will you eat and drink? And what will it be like if we come to eat with you? And that is it. Thank you. I've got a bit of a show and tell of objects that I don't know whether you are able to see, but this is Martino's mini Arnoldino stool. These are the cups. And also the short versions. And a bit of like fruit, Martino's fruit, orange salad, ginger. Oh, here's some pepper and salt. It's quite crazy. Salt and pepper grinders from Martino, recent addition, but you can see how they're very much like the stool. Maybe I'll do a little thing here. It's like facets upon facets. And then this is Ilse's candle. Probably can't from Gail Jensen. Yeah. Oh, this. And towards, we've got towards, this has just literally been in a plastic bag for the last year. So, there we go. Put that on top here. Yeah. Okay. It works much better in a lecture theatre, but hey. Has anyone got a question?
Hi, I just wanted to say I really loved this talk. It was really incredible to have this insight into your experiences at all of these different studios and the way that these different kind of practices worked in a kind of a first-hand way. Often accounts of design studios are very kind of outside in, only really looking at the results. So it was really lovely to kind of get a look into this kind of everyday, slightly mundane, but still quite fantastical experiences in these places. I was really curious about, you mentioned working for Matthew Barney on River of Fundament, which I loved that film. Were you present for like, when they were filming different scenes, like the huge like iron casting? I think that's what it was. The iron casting scene where you.
No, I wasn't actually. I was just there at the point where they were preparing a lot of props for the movie, and there was some casting that was starting to happen. But
Oh wow!
Casting of characters. But no, yeah, I wasn't there for any of the filming. It was a real shame actually, because I was only in New York for about 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually worked more on this archival exhibition. It's called, actually, you should check it out. It's really lovely. Oh, what's it called? Something. So I can't remember the title. It's called The Drawings of Matthew Barney, and it was Drawing Restraint. And I think Drawing Restraint. Don't know. But anyway, it was 2013 exhibition at the Morgan Library when it went to Paris. And if you're interested in Matthew Barney, I think you would like it, because it takes a lot of his process work, drawings, notes, film script, storyboard stuff, and puts it with archival, fantastical old drawings and creatures, and sort of putting those references in a way, showing how historical comes into his work.
Yeah, that sounds so interesting. Thank you. I'll definitely check it out. So it's just called The Drawings of Matthew Barney?
I think it's called Drawing Restraint, you know, but I don't know, maybe that's...
Yeah, it could be, because that's like that's okay, yeah, it could be that. All right. Thank you.
Might be called Subliming Vessel, maybe. Yeah.
Subliming Vessel?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, it's surrounded by all these things, you can't see them because I'm on my desktop.
Any other questions? Comments? Or...
Have some nuts.
Do you think you include food in your own process of working at all?
Can you say that again?
Yeah, because you know food is such a fundamental part of this process. Do you use that a lot in your own work at all?
Food. I wonder. I don't know. I think I associate food with being part of more of a studio culture than my own work, I guess. For me, I don't know, like I said, it sort of takes me back to memories of being, you know, eating a certain thing, being with certain people and having those conversations. But I definitely feel that at Goldsmiths, like when we've or in normal times, we would, I'm just thinking that we always go down the pub and eat those terrible burgers. And that's what reminds me of Goldsmiths. No.
Getting the question.
Yeah. But I don't know, I guess a big part of a culture of people coming together. And I think, you know, in my own work, the research work that I do now at Goldsmiths is cited in a kind of culture of going to the pub or going to have pho, having lunch together, spending long afternoons having coffee with Catherine and Ruby and like, I don't know, sort of different people that I talk about my work with. And I think maybe, I don't think this answering the question, but I kind of need an excuse to be somewhere and be drinking or eating something in order to spend time and then have those conversations about my own creative projects. And so they're cited within the food and drink aspect. And even though that food and drink within Goldsmiths is not necessarily that desirable or beautiful, maybe the pho is beautiful, but the pub isn't beautiful. It becomes the site, I think, through which you can start to discuss ideas you have, and those are the seeds of new projects. I think, you know, Catherine, we've talked a lot about projects and future collaborations and even lectures like this over a long coffee. Yeah.
There's a couple of questions in the chat. One is, what are you having for lunch today?
Well, probably just going to have, do you know what? I'm going to get it, I'll show you, because this is actually quite nice. This is the best sardines ever. So, sardines.
Yeah, fancy sardines. Yeah.
They're so good. And I don't know. I
Students about sardines.
I'm talking to students about sardines. My husband was like, "What is this? What, you teach design? What's going on?" Just going to peel the price off. What I love about this is, isn't it just so beautiful? Like the packaging, and I just have to save these tins because they're just amazing. So definite design appreciation here for that. But actually, I'm having a light lunch because it's Chinese New Year Eve today. So I've got my mum's Chinese, and I've got to tidy the house, and I've got to I'm going to do like a poached chicken with ginger and spring onion thing, but I need to text her to figure out how to do it. I have Chinese New Year dinner on Zoom. So I think this afternoon I'm going to be in full spring onion mode doing my chicken thing.
Brilliant. Ashley, I really like your comment. Do you want to tell us a bit more about it? I'll just read it out. It's really nice to have a taste of the world outside. There seems to be an awful lot of goldsmiths at Goldsmiths.
Yeah, no, I just, it's like, obviously I going to Goldsmiths, I'm kind of a typical Goldsmith student, but it's like, have you ever just spent too much time with yourself and just thought, wow, imagine if there were like hundreds of me, that would just be a lot. And now I found myself in this position where there sort of are. So it's nice to have a bit of outside input that doesn't feel like it's this sort of circle of validating the same sort of ideas, which I do all agree with and love, but it's nice to feel a little bit of outside input.
That's true. That's a really good comment.
It can be quite self-referential, I think. And I've been in situations like, I don't know, like a private view or something, and I'm like, yeah, I teach at Goldsmiths. And they're like, oh, okay, like design at Goldsmiths, and they're like, oh, really? Is there design at Goldsmiths? And I'm just reminded of like, hey, we sometimes think we're, you know, super important and everyone knows about us, and it's not true for everyone. And I think it's to reflect on the fact that, yeah, the world is so much bigger, and we have to constantly try and articulate what we do, and not just assume that, you know, we're the bee's knees or whatever we think we are at whatever point, you know. It's, you know, important to start to think of where we are in the world and the context of which we're operating. And I think, you know, something we do a lot in the second year, try and articulate your emerging practice. What is this course about? And start to feel confident about talking about that and owning that. Yeah, it's a process.
Yeah, that's a good little insight into your future steps.
That sounds great. I look forward to it.
The other question in the chat is, what are your thoughts
It's,
on studio culture?
I think it's also really nice to kind of have that kind of look into what it's actually like when people can be around each other and working with each other. Because of course this year for us, it's become an abstract idea, right? It's not, we don't really have that experience. We're all, you know, in these little boxes on a screen, and I don't know if many of us really talk to each other outside of like WhatsApp group chat, which is usually quite general. And so this year it's especially difficult to get that kind of studio culture. So I think your talk today was kind of just like a breath of fresh air, I guess. Just kind of a reassurance that, oh right, this is possible, and this is something that you can, you know, hold out as a hope for something to take joy in the future.
Yeah, that's a really nice point. You know, like, what can we take joy in together?
Yeah, exactly.
Food, it might be, I don't know, creating a group playlist. It might be just meeting for 10 minutes a day to just check in on each other. I was actually saying to Catherine today, sometimes I just phone my colleagues just to see how they're doing. You know, like I phoned Stuart the other day. How you doing, Stuart? You know, how's it going with year one? And because I would bump into him in the corridor, and I don't bump into him anymore. And actually, those conversations with colleagues, conversations with students, they're really nourishing. You know, and think about sort of emotional nourishment, like coming out of the conversation thinking, I've actually connected with someone, I've shared something, and I feel like I've got an energy again. And I think that's more important than ever. And so sometimes I think I text my colleagues and I say, you know, oh, can we have a chat? No, it's not like I need to chat about anything in particular. I just want to talk to them. I want to connect because it makes me feel, you know, part of something. And I think, you know, it's hard to feel part of something at the moment where we're all on little boxes. So maybe that's I don't know, these are structures and strategies you can start to put in place, not only as your own studio with the essay, but as a studio in general. Like the idea of actually touching base with someone once a day, or having a buddy check in, and, you know, even sitting and eating lunch together for half an hour. I think it does something, even if it sounds a bit silly and a bit like a task. You come out of that and you've spent some time together. So I don't know, whatever works for you, maybe you can design some ways to connect.
Yeah, it's really nice to have that reflection at this point. And it sort of relates to one of the other comments here from Jocelyn. I'll read it out, Jocelyn, but if you want to chip in, please do. And it says, what are your thoughts on studio culture now that we can't have lunch together?
Do you know what? My Teams has gone really funny. I'm going to jump out and I'm going to come back in.
I think just in following on from that conversation, I mean, we'll see what emerges from all of your groups this year. But yeah, perhaps the lens and the wider, the global context at the moment is going to really influence perhaps how you will think through this course a little bit. We'll see. But it's really nice to have these reflections and conversation with you all. Yeah, I've just gone on mute. We're just waiting for Karina. Thanks, Elizabeth. There's some DIY noises in the background, so I just went on mute for a bit. Hopefully we'll have Karina back with us for a few questions and to round off.
Hey, can you hear me?
Hi, you're back.
Hey. Sorry, my Teams goes really funny and then it zooms in on someone's face and
oh yeah, mine does that sometimes. Yeah, it sort of freezes.
yeah. There was a question. The question was something about.
What are your thoughts on studio culture now that we can't have lunch together?
Okay. Yeah. So I was going to say that in year 2 right now we're having this discussion because we have split off into 3 groups. We're doing live projects, which are the projects with industry. We're doing projects with We Made That, who are a public realm agency. We're doing a project with Facebook, augmented reality studios, and we're doing a project with, who's the other one? Apple, like, you know, Apple. And so we're fragmented into 3 groups. And also what we're noticing with the live brief partners, these companies, is that they're in exactly the same situation as us. You know, this thing of they had their studio cultures, they had their work cultures, and they can't, they don't have that anymore. Everyone's working from home. And so for us, I guess what I'm thinking right now in response to that question is studio culture. We can't have lunch together. No one can have lunch together. And so what we've understood, or what we're seeing through doing this collaboration in industry, is that this is bigger than us and everyone is starting to deal with it in their different ways, and they're having very similar types of ideas or thoughts or struggles to us, which is sort of in a weird way reassuring, because I think, you know, being at university and being at Goldsmiths, we feel, it's easy to feel that it's just us, you know, and we're struggling so much with all the things, you know, trying to make the experience as best as possible. But I think it sometimes feels like really lonely, and it feels like we're the only people going through this, but we're not, the whole world is. And so when the guy from Apple is talking about how his studio is completely fragmented and how it's difficult to collaborate, but the ways in which they're finding moments to share things that they enjoy or have discussions every day, it just contextualizes our situation in a bigger dynamic of a whole industry, that's a creative industry that's fragmented in the same way. And so I feel less bad about it, I guess, because everyone's having to respond in different ways to this, and we're just one of many university courses, but one of many groups of creative people who are faced with the same scenarios. And so then the question is, how can how can we do lunch together, or how can we do stuff together, even if it seems really trivial or really silly or a bit embarrassing or whatever. How can we do that? And maybe that's a good time to mention that we're going to have a pancake thing on Wednesday next week with our GLFs and the whole of year 2. And I think perhaps you'll be contacted about it soon by your GLFs, but they our GLFs, Meg and Lauren, are saying, you know, we need to find a way to do studio culture, and they've got lots of ideas around strange and funny and humorous events, and they're putting on these events in order for people to just feel involved in something that's not project related, that then can lead to us knowing each other a little better. So come to that. That's at midday on Wednesday next week. And I think it's something about making a pancake. Oh, it's to do with food. That's good. Make a pancake and do the weirdest thing you can do with a pancake, or something like that.
You guys should be well versed on that after doing your record-breaking attempts. Probably got all kinds.
Yeah.
Just also, you guys are sharing ideas with each other of getting together, which is really nice. I think it's brilliant that your talk, Karina, has obviously really resonated with people today. Something perhaps, as it's been said, that when people are missing, and it's drawing us out a little bit on Teams, which is really lovely to see. And Ashley, I think your comment that you made about just being on Teams and maybe doing stuff together, or just having it on in the background, so you're sort of together but not together, I think is a really nice idea. I've tried it a couple of times on some other projects. Sarah mentioned that we talked together earlier in the week, and we did a bit of that where we tried repairing some clothes, which was initially a kind of together, more sort of hands-on workshop, but then we all just stayed online together, and people spoke or didn't, or went to sleep or didn't, and everyone did their own thing, and I think it worked quite well. So I definitely recommend you guys trying things like that, sort of working together in a looser way, not necessarily just having intensive meetings. That could be really helpful. That's a really good idea.
Exactly. If like work happens during a lunch break or during a social event, then turn your meetings into social events and just enjoy it. Because I think maybe it's like the sweet spot where work doesn't feel like a chore, where work is a kind of working together is a pleasurable thing that everyone enjoys. And I think that's the key to a studio culture. And everything you see or pick up in terms of inspiration or read is resonating with the thing you're collectively doing together. And so it all just rolls into one in the best possible way. That's where you want to get in any project. Maybe you've got to, like, being able to enjoy or be invested in the thing that you're exploring. If that's a pleasurable thing for you, or you can make that something you enjoy, then it won't ever feel like a drag, right? It can still be hard work, but hard work that you enjoy and you feel proud and happy to invest your time in.
Brilliant. Are there any final sort of comments or questions for Karina?
Go out my candle.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Nice to meet you guys virtually.